Welcome to Command Combat, everybody. We are fighting around the world using Memoir 44. There are 10 games, and we're keeping score between the Axis and the Allies. The score is tied at 3 each. This is Game 7. We're back in Europe with the Americans fighting the Germans. It is the Battle of Saverne Gap. The Saverne Gap, cutting through the Vosges Mountains, was the key to Strasbourg, capital city of Alsace. Again, my apologies for the French pronunciations. On September 21st, the U.S. 7th Army 15th Corps, under the command of General Wade Hampton Halslip, arrived to the front lines at Phalsbourg. With the infantry progressing forward into the Saverne Gap, General Leclerc divided his 2nd French Armor Division into 2 task forces. The first would move well north of the gap by La Petite Pierre, the other on secondary roads in the south through heavily forested mountains by Dabo. They would take Saverne simultaneously from both the north and south, avoiding the strong defenses expected in the gap itself. The stage is set. The battle lines are drawn. There are no special rules for this battle. The Americans are simply trying to overrun the dug-in Germans. Both sides are looking for 5 points to win the game. With all that established, let's get started. The Americans begin with some troops behind enemy lines and attack the town, but the Germans are ready for them with an ambush, and they blast most of them away. But the Americans still have some fight in them, and they take out half the Germans before pulling back behind the hill. The Germans counterattack with the same tactic, rushing out of the town to kill off the surviving Americans. But they don't get a single hit, so they run back into the town. The Americans do a general assault along their left flank, and the massive tanks cause the Germans to pull back into the woods. The Germans counter on the same side, but only manage to cause the Americans to pull back a little. They push forward anyway, and get right into the faces of the Jerries. But those against the tanks get infantry result, and those against the infantry get a tank result. So all they manage to do is push back the German armor. The Germans counter on the same flank, doing a little damage and causing others to retreat. The Americans continue their advance, whittling down the armor, then finishing it off. That gives them 1 point on the scoreboard. The Germans do a pincer move, but only manage to push a unit of armor back. The Americans push forward along all fronts, getting some barbed wire out of the way and hitting the Germans in a village. The Germans concentrate on the center, damaging a unit and causing another to pull back. The Americans move out their infantry, rushing forward along the center. The Germans recon their right, pushing back some armor. The American infantry removes the remaining barbed wire. The Germans open fire from their positions, damaging the armor and taking out some of the infantry along the front that's advancing. But the Americans are undeterred. They launch their all-out assault, destroying the German unit in the village and taking position all around it. The Germans pull their damaged unit into the woods to deny the Americans another point. But there are plenty of other German units for the slaughter, and the Americans take down another. And they even move on the artillery, which fires back at them, destroying the unit. It's their only point so far, as they destroy no other units across the board. The Americans bring up their heavy artillery and fire a counter battery, causing the Germans to pull back their artillery. The Germans continue to push back the Sherman tanks. The Americans go all in the center, destroying half the artillery and pushing up on the dug-in infantry. The Germans pull the remaining artillery back into the town. Their backs are against the wall, but they have a well-fortified position. The Americans pause for a moment to regroup and heal their wounded. That gives the Germans time to launch their armor assault, and they do so in the center, pushing the infantry out of the woods. Next to them, the Americans assault the German trenches, but their defensive fire takes out infantry along the front, causing one of the units to pull back. Frustrated, the Americans call for an all-out infantry assault. They take the trenches. They whittle down the tanks in the woods with one unit, then another. The Americans are 1 point away from winning, so the Germans have to get the lead out. They try to do something on their right, but only manage to damage a tank unit and make it retreat. The Americans have the Germans on the fence. They go after the artillery, but only get tank results. They go after the infantry in the woods, but only get a star. The Germans step up and annihilate the tank unit. They are catching up with the Americans, so they get orders direct from HQ. Finish them! The Americans assault the woods, taking out the armor. They assault the town, taking out the artillery. It is major overkill, and they go well past their 5 points, winning the game 5-3. Well, that was certainly a long one, and difficult to predict until the end. But ultimately, it's another victory for the Allies, who have now caught up with and passed the Axis with 4-3. Our next battle will take us back to the Pacific, so come on back and join us for that, will you? As we continue,
making movies, making music, and fighting around the world.
Happy gaming, everybody.